All right. So let's see. I sent you home last week with the first week's assignment, just to kind of notice when you are in a mode of just being able to trust your ability to meet what arises. I also suggested you do some reflection on your own history of faith, your own history of finding the path in whatever form that's taken, or finding a teacher, or finding or getting a glimpse of freedom. So, and we've got this talk tonight. So that gives you a menu of things to bounce off of. And maybe you want to talk about something entirely other. I usually can follow you wherever you go.
I did a lot of observing over the last couple of weeks. And I found a couple of things. I mean, there is a faith in that I'm still getting up. There's a
faith, yes.
There's a faith of something and going.
Faith the day holds something.
Yeah. Not always feel a lot of faith, but then in moments, just feeling presence. For me, it's so much connected to the body. I'm really still having trouble, like when you're talking about faith, and especially in this Buddhist context, faith in what? And also reality, the notion of reality, because which ties into judgment. It seems we have each of us have different experiences of reality. So there might be a faith in the sense of a confidence or at moments in one's own experience or sense, felt what you might call that felt sense, but it might not match up to others. So that's one thing. But also when I hear faith, I'm still trying to faith in, is it faith in something, faith in divine, faith in, even what is faith in awakening seems so abstract to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I'm trying to give you concrete experiences in your meditation where of faith. And even the one you started with of getting up in the morning, there is a concrete experience of faith in getting out of bed in the morning. Which anybody who's struggled to get out of bed in the morning, and I don't mean just with sleepiness, but with depression, knows it takes something, some sense that the day holds something to get you out of bed.
So is it faith or will? But see, faith to me, I guess maybe
it can be will. It can be will.
Sense. Huh?
It can be will.
It can be will.
Yeah.
And there's a desire to see what would happen. But faith, I always think, is like as something in almost something outside of oneself.
Uh-huh. So what do you do with the light you are?
That's what I do with it. At times I just am it. I don't tie that to faith.
Well, I don't really want to argue how you
No, I don't understand.
I'm
really grounding to understand.
But yes, I know if you go around the world and you question people, what do you mean by faith? They'll tell you what they have faith in. They have faith in the Bible. They have faith in the Catholic Church. They have faith in Muhammad. They have faith in the Buddha. They have faith. They probably don't have a lot of faith in the Congress right now, for example. So yeah, I think if we're doing a survey, the word faith is usually like, what outside myself do I put my trust in? And that's kind of something from the first class on, I've been trying to break down a bit, because I don't actually think that is what the experience of faith is about. I don't even think it's true in Christianity or Islam when it comes right down to it. But I'm not going to go too deeply into that because that's a whole nother subject. And so, one can be a Buddhist in that sort of exterior faith sort of way. if you want, everything the Buddha says is true, and I'm going to apply it and so forth. You can relate that way, and millions of people do. Absolutely. But I think it's quite limited. And it's not what awoke in me when I sensed the freedom in those teachers, those first Buddhist teachers that I had. What awoke in me was not, oh, I just do everything they say and that's going to be my path. That's not what I think the deepest meaning of faith is. It's trusting one's deepest experience. Heart has of what is the path. So even if you throw it on something external, what was happening in you that you suddenly became a Muslim, or you became a Christian, or you became what happened here? What was known? And I think if you kind of go into your head and you do this, well, not everybody puts it in the same thing, and so it's not, that's, again, I kind of want to get stuck there, because my sense is that what's happening here in people is the same all around. And I had a conversation in an airport in Bangkok once with this group of young people who were evangelicals. They had flown to Thailand from Oklahoma, and they were staying with Christian Thais, and had learned, in order to kind of, I don't know exactly their whole purpose there, but they were young and they were enthusiastic, and they wanted to learn about Buddhism. It was kind of cool. So I got to teach them about Buddhism, and they were really open to hearing about my experience. And there's sometimes this thing among evangelicals where they're told that they shouldn't trust their experience. Like it's a bad thing to trust your experience. Nobody had gotten to these kids yet about that, evidently, because I think they really did trust their experience, and they really appreciated me giving them the inner experience of a Westerner who had come to Buddhism. The lights went on in them as to what I was doing and why. And I could talk to them. I've also sometimes run into evangelicals who have been told they shouldn't trust their experience. And I say, well, when you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, did nothing happen inside of you? Absolutely nothing. And they say, oh, well, yes, this happened. And and my life changed. And suddenly, and then they go and they begin to witness as to what the transformation was in themselves due to this interior event of beginning to welcome something in. And again, I don't want to get lost in the weeds of the word of if it's Jesus or whatever, but you can actually engage people in what actually happened. And you can't tell me that your continuing to follow Christianity isn't based in your experience. It's based on some glimpse you had of a better life that happened in that moment. Of better friendships that arose from that, of, being able to stop drinking or whatever their story is. They all have these stories, if you scratch that surface. And that, to me, has more to do with faith, that kind of intuitive, heart level connection that one makes, which is way ahead of the mind. Way ahead of the mind. The mind hasn't figured it out yet. The mind doesn't have a definition of reality. The mind can't compare this version to that. It's but there's something one knows that comes alive in those contexts. And I wish the people could learn to speak this language. I think we'd have a lot less problem talking to each other than we do now, where it's often kind of based in who do you follow? Who do you give who do you give authority to? You know, and in that sort of way. So does that kind of help make it clearer, Allison? That is, I'm not talking about faith in the usual way people do talk about it.
So
it's trusting a kind of knowing that
would you, because I know you write poetry, would you say, like for me, I keep sort of trying to understand it. I think of art, music, dance, poetry, something more ineffable.
Yeah.
That it's
ineffable. I don't know if you write poetry, but the best poetry often, it's like it just keeps coming down line by line, and it's a mystery where it's coming from. Like, what is it that's able to synthesize this stuff right now? And when I try to do it, it comes off kind of clunky, and it just isn't that good. But then sometimes just like comes through. Or if you're talking about dancing, I mean, dancing, people have used dancing as spiritual path forever. It may be the original spiritual path is drumming and dancing. And there's something that happens that people begin to touch into a different kind of knowing, a different kind of connection that awakens them to a different possibility. And so then they start talking about the sacred and things like that, but it arises out of an experience. It arises out of, that. So last week I encouraged people to reflect on that. Like, what are your experiences that it arises out of? What have you actually touched in that? So is that making sense, Allison?
Yeah, and I guess it's what has confused me is I always have had this notion, maybe it's more from that traditional of faith, and it's like once you have faith, you have it. The other thing which you're talking about and which I experienced comes and goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I never.
And there's a whole purification of doubt that happens. Doubt is not the enemy of faith. There's a whole kind of purification of that. And one thing I like about Buddhism is it talks about that. Some other religious traditions are a little more scared of doubt, but Buddhism is not. And so, yeah, it's not a constant thing. And sometimes people lose it deeply, not only their faith in some sort of spiritual tradition, but their faith in life itself. They lose it, and they can't get out of bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a
thank you.
Not a guarantee.
That's helpful. Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, Marcia.
I'm gonna try and put language to this. The experience that I've been having more lately, and when Allison, when you mentioned the body, it reminded me, because I also am a very body-oriented person, and through my practice, I've also been working with connecting and bringing in, reminding myself of the being that I am, that I'm in this body, but that my presence, my spirit, my being is really who I am. And that the more that I identify with that, you said the light that we are, it feels like as I connect with that part inside, it also connects me with that reality all around.
Mm.
And that as I'm more in touch with that inside, it helps me to feel a trust that I can trust myself to find my yeses and my nos. And I'm getting an inkling that is what intuition is, and that is what will lead me to faith, is that trust in my own deepest experience.
Beautiful. You said it very well. Had no difficulty saying it at all from my point of view of that connection of how when you trust the light in yourself, the presence, that you begin to get a sense that it's connected to everything around you. It's not an isolated experience. You can follow this through the world because it's not disconnected from everything around you.
Right.
And the
that
trust in that grows.
yes. And that it's not this abstract being that I'm working to have faith in.
Exactly.
It's the same being that I am.
It's the same being that you are, but in an expanded sense, if we can say that.
Expanded sense.
Expanded sense, not the little sense of the ego that's worried about itself and what people think and all of that, but this expanded sort of sense of presence that you begin to settle in to inside of yourself, that you begin to see that here is this as well.
And I used to use the term divine spirit, but I've started saying divine presence because when I use the word presence, I have more of a sense of that being right here again, rather than something far away.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. We're kind of on the same page here. And the word God is a tricky one. It's a very tricky one because it can point to what you're talking about. And it can also point away from what you're talking about, that very word, depending on how it's being used, how people are using it. It can be something to undermine your trust. It can be used to undermine your trust in your own presence and your own connectedness. Oddly enough, it's so odd. And the longer I hang out in spirituality, the more I see how the very words can come to mean the opposite of what they mean. And so thank you. Thank you for articulating that. That was very helpful.
Tonight has been awesome. Seriously, mic drop. That's what I kept thinking earlier. Your talk was great. Like one of the things I want to bring up is this sense of intention and how that can almost be seen as a primer for faith, at least in my experience. So like I intend to do something, and generally those things come out according to how I intend them to. Granted, I'm careful not to expect that they do, in the sense that I'm going to be rigid if they don't, but that I intend to enact in certain ways, whether that's carrying myself through situations, and that it's going to bring me to the other side. And somehow I feel as though that might be a kind of precursor to faith, kind of like the works without faith is dead, which is a whole other thing. But
yeah,
the intention into doing things.
Yeah. I mean, the way I tend to look at it is there's something that informs that intention. Yeah, you have a felt knowing that acting in certain ways will lead to a better life. So you intend to act that way, right? There's a
Interesting. Okay.
There's a felt knowing. There's a felt knowing of the integrity that's behind certain actions and the lack of integrity, for example, in other actions. Am I kind of on the right track here in terms of what you're thinking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
definitely.
yeah, there's a sense, and people have talked about the body. I think the body is a great barometer of integrity if you have paid attention to it properly. If you haven't, it's probably not a very good barometer. But there's something in the gut. There's an intelligence in the gut that can help you to know when something doesn't have integrity or when it does. There's a felt sense. But even prior to developing a sense of integrity, there's some germ that informs you that that's worth heading towards, worth intending. So that's just how I kind of look at it, Nate, is that intention follows this felt sense of knowing.
So it's backwards from how I said it.
Yeah. I mean,
And it sounds more accurate.
you agree? Because otherwise intention has this flavor of just kind of coming from nowhere. And intention doesn't come from nowhere. It's informed. Our intentions are informed. What are they informed by? Well, sometimes they're informed by our thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are crazy. Sometimes they're informed by like wisdom. And that's a good thing. In a wise moment, then our intentions kind of are informed by wisdom, and they're likely to bear good fruit. But in intention itself, it's got to be informed by something. It's got to come from something.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Intentions are powerful. I mean, once you've locked, that's the right word. Maybe lock's not the right word, but I'll use it. Once you've kind of locked into an important intention and you stick with it, it's powerful. It's powerful in your life. It's like a bulldozer kind of going through and moving the big snowbanks aside in order to create a path for you. If you really see, for example, you say, I want to live a life of integrity, and I don't want to compromise, that begins to clear stuff aside. If you say, I want to awaken, that also clears things aside. If you want to be the greatest poet that ever lived, that'll clear things aside too, If you want to, whatever you set as your intention, it creates the future and it tends to move things aside. And it's a very powerful thing. And because it's powerful, it's important that it be informed by wisdom, that we operate from the wisest intentions we can when we set those kind of goals for ourselves, that they're actually coming from wisdom. All right. I may have over-answered your question, but there you go. So let's see.
Great.
Here, Allison, do you have a last little thing you want to chime in on?
Well, I guess,
All right. We got just a minute.
it's playing back on Marcia, so when we lose, and I'm thinking because I've experienced it, I went through it the last few years, losing that connection in a sense to ourselves, our truth, and maybe I would add now an integrity, a sort of an alignment, what might be a yes or right, and then in a sense maybe destroy our lack of faith, destroy our faith, or at least cloud it. And so my thought, my experience is I'm trying to say, what is it that reconnects to that faith integrity? For me, I think it seems sometimes other people and some experience or meditation or practice, something may just shift, but also sometimes other people that hold presence. There's a support system.
They restore us to ourselves. Other people that sometimes holding presence for us restores us to ourselves. And you're right. Sometimes we betray the light inside us. And sometimes that's through sheer ignorance. And sometimes it happens even very young in confusing situations. We just like bury the light inside us because it's the only way to survive. But it's often someone's presence that begins to restore that light, like the way a candle can light another candle. There's
Or the
something there.
presence of nature or something.
And yeah, or presence of nature can also be helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Have a good week.